Namaste. Welcome to UGC E-Pathshala for Postgraduate Studies. I am Anita Khanna and I teach Japanese in Jawaharlal Nehru University. Today we will study about Japanese literature, especially the pre-modern Japanese literature, and today's paper's name is An Introduction to Japanese Literature in English. This is paper 15. The title of today's module is Edo Literature. As we all know, Edo period is leading to the modern era of Meiji period of Japan. So, it is called Kinsei, and Meiji period subsequently is modern. So, this is Kinsei is the equivalent of early modern or just pre-modern, or it could be called a prelude to the modern era, that is the Meiji period. As we say, this period is known for a number of catch phrases like ero, which is abbreviation of erotic. So, erobungaku, or it is also known by ukiyo zoshi, that is the floating world of pleasures. Also, the literature per se is known as gesaku, which means the popular literature. I feel the trends of this period could be well defined by gazoku. Ga means refined, something like yoga, and zoku is something, zoku or gesaku or vulgar, and in other words, we have on one hand the most classy trends in this period, and also on the other hand very popular literature defined by gesaku. Needless to say, such literature has elements of entertainment, travelogues, humor, satire, street gossip, pun on words, and parody, etc. of the classical works. Not only so, even the other factors or the social elements show a constant shift from the ga to zoku. So, those elegant works which were written by the Kamigata writers who were from the Kyoto, Osaka, who were from the Kyoto area, there is a shift to the subject matter, readership, etc., with the shifting of the capital to Edo, near or the old name for Tokyo. So, these various factors that contributed to this change in the trends as well as readership and other factors was foremost driven by the rise of Edo as the commercial center for the townsmen and people from all over Japan, various other provinces moved to Edo in pursuit of better prospects. Since the army general Tokugawa shogun lived in Edo, the families of daimyo were also made to reside by them while their men served in the provinces. due to the Sankin Kotai system they adopted. So making Edo, so Edo turned out to be the biggest consumption center full of goods produced in and consumerism. And in due course of time, the focus of literary activity also shifted to Tokyo. And the Kyoto Osaka area or the Kamigata area was overshadowed by the bright or better economic prospects in all spheres in the Edo. As a result, the popular art and culture bloomed, which had its own style and different yardsticks for refinements and different parameters for refinement as represented by tsu. Tsu is a term which is equal to something trendy or fashionable, and that was the style of the day. The foremost factor that brought about the change in readership as well as writings was the publishing industry. In the first half of Edo period itself, tremendous progress was made in this field of printing and publishing. The major publisher of the time who had established them in Kyoto, Osaka area or Kamigata area were almost monopolizing the trade with the Hachimonji Ya, the publisher of Kyoto. Kyoto, being the center of culture, was also instrumental in the publishing, and the books with beautiful illustrations came and were in circulation and became a fad more and more with the beautiful illustrations of wood block prints and interesting material. Also with the proliferation of literacy, the Kyoto centered publisher industry also moved to Edo, and like this Edo became the center of publication, sales, records due to the vast urban population soared, and the Kyoto publishers were overshadowed by the fast growing publishers of Edo area like Suwaraya, publisher of Edo. Who were the writers of this period? The writers of this period were somewhat like those Nyobo of Heian period or the women writers who resigned to the fact that they had no say in the political or any other sphere and were indifferent to what pleased others. So they were, due to the commercialization of publication and creative writing, and they took writing as a profession that supported them economically as well as the publishers who backed them. So like this, they were, rather than being driven by the personal sentiments, they were more intuitive about their approaches and readership and the criticism. Especially the criticism by the authorities was strong, and innovations were controlled or limited to some extent, so that the vigilant authorities who also issued orders to censor and ban some of the vulgar works on a look for the lawbreakers. Needless to say, the shogun and the authority were vigilant that at times they incurred punishment and penalty on some of the writers who were found guilty of ignoring the instruction or the limitation, crossing the limitations, And it is well known that one of the prominent writers, Santo Kyoden, and his publishers were put behind, not behind bars, but were put to house arrest with handcuffs for 50 days. It was in 1802, and it was because of the ban on Sharebon which they published by breaking that law. And Sharebon were the fashionable books, and under the name of fashion or trendiness, they published the profiles of the geisha who were prominent in the geisha quarters, although they were licensed. So, like this, we can narrow down the writers to aristocrats, merchants, samurai, and some anonymous writers. So, the Kamigata Bungaku of this period, which centered around Nara, Kyoto region, was written by the elites and aristocrats who remained engaged in cultural pursuits and with the surface cultural pursuits. As Osaka area became the main commercial center, it gave a boost to the literary activities in this area, which eventually came to be known as the literature or the refined literature known as Kamigata Bungaku. The next group of writers were from merchant class, and the merchant class, due to the money power and a sense of liberation, spent their time either in the pleasure quarters or were given to the writing. The representative work of this class, those who were given to pleasure quarters as well as to writing, is Ihara Saikaku, a merchant who took to writing while doing his business and also enjoying pleasure quarters. And he excelled not only in these fields, that is the writing on life of people and indulging in pleasures. Also, he wrote about the life of merchants, how they face ups and downs, as well as with a touch of satire, and also about the values of the merchants which sustained them. The samurai class of writers. Samurai, due to the emphasis on martial training and Confucian morals or education, for samurai, these class constituted a part of intelligentsia. However, with long sustained peace and no particular role to play, some of them took to writing, particularly towards the second half of the period. I must mention that the samurai were placed as elites in the samurai being shi or bushi. They were on the top of the social strata, and the next was farmers, followed by artisans, and then came the merchants or shonen. And the samurai were given special privileges. This sunken kotai system also resulted in the high burden on the finances of daimyo, and this gradually impoverished the samurai, and some of them relinquished their special title as samurai and opted to become common people or commoners and took to writing. So, the in during that piece, the role of writing, particularly so in the times of peace, some excellent writers came up, and some of them used their writings to criticize the shoguns or the authorities indirectly. One of those is the Koikawa Harumachi. Some samurai intellectuals who took to writing during the liberal policies of the shoguns. One of them was Koikawa Harumichi. He lived between 1745 to 1789. Kinkin Sensei no Eiga no Yume, translated as Master Gold's Dream of Splendor, was the trendsetter work for this genre. This title was illustrated by Harumichi himself, and he was in the service of Lord Matsudaira of Suruga province, and he started writing under his pen name of Koikawa Haru, although his actual name was Kurahashi Kaku. His other works were like Bakemono Oeyama. It was based on the Otogizoshi, and some of his characters were from the Japanese folk tales like Shutenji of Oeyama. Among the writers of this time, another prominent samurai writer was Hoseido Kisanji, a samurai who wrote Kibyoshi and also Kyoka, the mad verse or the humorous verse. In the last analysis, I would like to say that Tokugawa period or Edo period could be compared with the Heian period in more than one ways. In this period, under the continuous rule of the Tokugawa Bakufu, during the Edo period, the political stability was maintained, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, who laid the foundation of Tokugawa rule, also ensured that functional and stability without any threat of any kind is maintained, especially on internal as well as external fronts. Although their strategy was such, almost like Fujiwara family of the Heian period, who would not allow the influence of any other prominent family or officials on the emperor and continue to control power in their name or in their hand single-handedly for over nearly 2 centuries. There is yet another similarity in the literary tradition of the two, that is, the new trends that emerged in Heian period developed and bloomed in the later periods. For example, the prose works of Monogatari, and the writers also had some political ambition, as the situation was in case of Heian writers. The Tokugawa literature was realistic, and it portrayed the immediate society in its various shades and colors. In doing so, for a readership which enjoyed fun and humor and entertainment, the works of Edo period or Tokugawa period, the language of the works also tended to be close to the colloquial and spoken language, different from the classical one of the earlier works. So, there were more dialogues among as the plot evolved, and at least in the second half there emerged many writers who took creative writing as a profession rather than as a pleasure. In other words, they wrote for a steady income to sustain themselves. Like this, the publishing houses also increased in number, and some of them made lending libraries or reading room in their premises, and although the overall approach was very professional, the new elements that symbolize the literary scene in Edo period developed and bloomed fully in the Meiji period, which is the modern period of Japan.